So next up is the 1982 anthology horror classic Creepshow, which I'm sure if you're a horror fan, you've probably at least heard of, if not seen, multiple times or owned on DVD. Being an anthology horror, there's a framing sequence of a boy being reprimanded by his strict father for reading some horror comic books. And the stories in the movie are made out of the stories from the comic book, giving the whole movie sort of a cheesy comic booky feeling, which I think definitely reflects in the movie. And if you've seen the movie, you know the five stories. Probably the most well known probably being The Crate. This one with Stephen King. Decent one called Something to Tide You Over, which is more of like a thriller revenge type story. Then there's a cockroach one, so if you're into the more insect horror, that one might appeal to you more. There's a zombie story at the beginning titled Father's Day. I'll be honest, the Stephen King story, I sort of always forget that one because it's not great. Yeah, being an anthology movie, it's a difficult movie to take as a whole because there might be some stories that are really enjoyable and other stories that are, maybe not that great. So it's a very popular movie, but there's some stories in this movie I just really don't care much for.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, the stories, they're just kind of up and down. I can't remember all the different titles, but I know the first one I kind of liked. Then the second one, which was the one with Stephen King playing the hillbilly dude, that kind of took it down. Then it kind of goes back up again with was it Something to Tide You Over? That was third.
Yes, which had Leslie Nielsen in it, by the way, which I thought was a lot of fun.
Yeah, the Crate one's fine. The other two, was there two more or just one more?
The other one would be the cockroach one.
Yeah,
they creep up on you.
I never really cared too much for that one outside of the actual effects, with the cockroaches later on. But in terms of the actual little story, I didn't really care too much about that one.
Yeah, I think the problem with that one is it's not much of a story. This is main character who's an absolute asshole, and all of a sudden there are cockroaches out of his penthouse, and that's basically it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, I know a lot of people, especially horror fans, they really like Creepshow because they probably grew up watching it. For me, I actually never watched it when I was young, and I just never... I've seen it a couple of times now, but I never really had any urge to watch it. And for me, anthology movies in general, while I don't mind them, I don't think I've ever seen one where I absolutely love it. And maybe that's because short stories, I just, they're so short that I can't really get too involved in what's happening. So for me, it's more just, watching some good practical effects from time to time. And, you may have a giggle or two, like, I think the Crate one, there's that scene where he kind of daydreams about shooting his wife in front of everyone. They're all clapping, and,
I mean, that woman was something else.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could say... I can't remember the name of the actress, but she probably must have done a really good job because you really did want to see her die.
Which is probably why that story is one of the more popular ones in the movie.
Yeah, short stories, they just... I just can't get into them. They just don't have enough substance, I think, to really immerse myself in whatever is happening.
So I was born in the early 90s. I'm definitely not one of the people who saw this in the theaters when it came out. And I'm not sure if I really saw this much when I was a kid. I remember some of the stories, but I'm not sure if I ever sat down and watched the whole thing. At the same time, there's a definite feeling of nostalgic value that I have in watching this. So even though I may not have seen the whole movie when I was younger, every time I see this, there's something about it that just feels a bit special. to me on a personal level. And it's not that any of the stories are amazing. I think probably the best stories, or one of my favorite stories, is probably Something to Tide You Over. And then The Crate is also really good, but neither one's, an A-plus material. At the same time, I think as a whole, packaged together, especially with the comic book, cut scenes, I think it has a lot going for it. In my opinion, Creepshow is often considered it's a classic movie, and a lot of horror fans have decently strong feelings toward it, and I think it's pretty easy to see why, even if you don't necessarily enjoy each of the stories. If you just take a step back and see the movie as a whole, you can at least appreciate where it's going for. And sometimes it's probably a bit too comic booky, the Stephen King story. Like Chucky had some great special effects, especially toward the end. But it's probably a bit too comedic to be something I would generally like. Overall, though, I would say it's probably an 8.5 from me, because even though some of the stories, such as Father's Day, or they creep up on you, they might be lacking in substance. Even so, I think as a whole, the movie is decently enjoyable. In fact, very enjoyable, since I gave it an 8.5. So that would probably be my rating.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I give it a 6 out of 10. I know some people will have their pitchforks out and probably saying a few nasty things as I give that rating.
I think it's important to say, I think both of us have very controversial opinions on a lot of different movies, which if you keep listening, you'll probably find out as we keep going.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I a 6 out of 10 is still not a bad score. It's just not a great score. For me, it's more about the practical effects, which there tends to be like one scene in each of those mini stories where you can kind of look at the effects and go, that's funky, that's cool, and a lot of that's probably to do with Tom Savini, because he's that effects wizard that he is. So yeah, for me, it's just more about seeing those effects, and the stories themselves didn't do much for me. So 6 out of 10 is my score.